Lisa Brooks stared out the viewport of the transport ship as Kepler-7 station grew larger in the darkness of space. The massive structure rotated slowly against the backdrop of distant stars, its lights twinkling like a city floating in the void. She pressed her palm against the cool metal wall and felt the gentle vibration of the engine slowing down. "First time seeing the Academy?" asked Captain Rodriguez, the human pilot who had volunteered to fly her to the station. His weathered face showed concern as he watched her expression. "Yes," Lisa replied, adjusting her crisp Navy uniform. "I still can't believe they accepted a human application." Captain Rodriguez chuckled. "Don't sell yourself short, Lieutenant Commander. Earth didn't send just anyone. You earned your spot here." Lisa touched the small geometric tattoo on her left hand without thinking. The simple pattern of intersecting lines and triangles had been with her for 8 years now, ever since her college graduation. Her grandmother had always loved quilts with similar designs, and Lisa had chosen the tattoo to honor her memory. The docking procedure took another hour. Lisa gathered her single bag and followed the captain through the airlock into Kepler-7 station. The main corridor stretched ahead of them, wide enough for several species to walk side by side. The walls displayed welcome messages in dozens of languages, including the flowing script of the Centauri Federation and the geometric symbols of the Vorthak Empire. "The Academy is in Section 7, Captain Rodriguez said, checking his tablet. "Take the Blue Line transport." "Good luck, Lisa. Make us proud." Lisa thanked him and walked toward the transport system. Around her, beings from across the galaxy moved with purpose. She saw a group of tall, blue-skinned Centaurians discussing something in their musical language. Near them, a crystalline Vorthak moved with careful, precise steps, its faceted body catching the station's lights. The transport car was nearly empty when Lisa climbed aboard. She selected her destination and settled into a seat designed to accommodate multiple species. The car accelerated smoothly through transparent tubes that offered views of the station's interior. Gardens filled with alien plants rotated past, along with marketplaces where dozens of species traded goods from across the galaxy. When the transport stopped at Section 7, Lisa stepped out into the Academy's main entrance hall. The space was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed a real-time view of the stars outside. Students from 12 different species moved between classrooms and study areas. Their conversations created a complex symphony of sounds that somehow felt welcoming, despite being completely foreign. "You must be the human," said a voice behind her. Lisa turned to see a being that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a scholar. Its large compound eyes studied her with obvious intelligence, while 4 arms held different tablets and data devices. "I'm Lisa Brooks," she replied. Extending her hand in the human greeting she had been taught was considered polite by most species. "High Scholar Grenth of the Calarian Archives," the being replied, touching her hand briefly with one of its 4 hands. "I confess many of us were surprised when we heard a human had been accepted. Your species has only been traveling between stars for 50 years. Lisa felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "We may be new to space travel, but we're eager to learn." Grenth's mandibles clicked in what she hoped was approval. "Indeed. Come, I will show you to the orientation hall. Classes begin tomorrow." They walked through corridors lined with displays showing the history of galactic civilization. Lisa saw images of the first interstellar treaty, signed 3,000 years before humans had even invented writing. Ancient space battles between species that were now close allies. The rise and fall of empires that had spanned entire star systems. The orientation hall was packed with students. Lisa estimated about 200 beings from across the known galaxy. She was the only human present. As Grenth led her to an empty section, conversations quieted and heads turned to stare at her. "The primitive species has arrived," someone whispered, in what they probably thought was a quiet voice. Lisa pretended not to hear, but the comment stung. A massive being approached them. It looked like an ancient turtle that had grown to the size of a small building, with a shell covered in intricate patterns and wise, ancient eyes. "I am Overseer Muln," the being said in a voice that seemed to come from deep underground. "Welcome to the Galactic Academy, Lieutenant Commander Brooks. I trust your journey was comfortable." "Yes, sir. Thank you for accepting my application." Overseer Muln's eyes studied her carefully. "Your test scores were impressive, particularly in pattern recognition and cultural analysis. We shall see how you adapt to our methods." The orientation began with a presentation about the Academy's history. Lisa learned that it had been founded 2,000 years ago to train diplomats, archaeologists, and cultural experts who could work across species boundaries. The curriculum included xenobiology, galactic history, advanced linguistics, and archaeological methods. Your first assignment, Overseer Muln announced, will be to work in teams to analyze an ancient artifact that has puzzled our best scholars for centuries. The artifact was discovered on a dead world in the Outer Rim, clearly created by an advanced civilization, but we have been unable to determine its purpose or origin. Lisa felt a spark of excitement. This was exactly the kind of challenge she had hoped for when she applied to the Academy. Teams will be formed based on species compatibility and complementary skills, the Overseer continued. Vorthak students will work with other crystal-based species. Centaurians will team with fellow telepathic species. Calirians will join other archive-based civilizations. Lisa waited for her team assignment, but none came. As the other students gathered into groups of 3 or 4, she remained alone. Finally, she approached Overseer Muln. "Excuse me, sir. I think there was an error. I wasn't assigned to a team." The ancient being's eyes showed what might have been sympathy. "There was no error, Lieutenant Commander. You are the only human here, and we have no data on how your species works with others in academic settings. You will work alone." Around the hall, Lisa could hear quiet laughter and whispered comments. She caught fragments of conversations in languages. She was still learning. The human thinks she can solve what we cannot. 50 years in space, and they believe they understand ancient mysteries. This should be amusing to watch. Lisa straightened her shoulders and met Overseer Muln's gaze. "I understand, sir. When do we begin?" "Tomorrow at dawn station time. The artifact is in Research Lab 7. You will have 2 weeks to present your findings." As the orientation ended and students began to leave for their quarters, Lisa found herself walking alone through the corridors. Her room assignment was in the human-compatible section of the station, which turned out to be a small area designed for species with similar environmental needs. Her quarters were comfortable but simple. A bed, a desk, a small kitchen, and a viewport showing the stars outside. Lisa unpacked her few belongings and sat at the desk to review the materials she had been given about the Academy. She looked at her reflection in the dark viewport and traced the tattoo on her hand again. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Sometimes the old patterns hold more wisdom than we realize, dear. Never be ashamed of where you come from." Lisa smiled and opened her tablet to begin researching ancient galactic civilizations. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she would prepare. She had not come this far to be intimidated by a few snickers and whispers. Outside her viewport, the stars continued their ancient dance, holding secrets that someone, perhaps even a human, might one day unlock. The alarm in Lisa's quarters chimed softly at dawn, station time. She had barely slept, her mind racing with excitement about the artifact assignment. After a quick breakfast and shower, she made her way to Research Lab 7. The lab was a large, circular room with workstations designed for different species. Advanced scanning equipment lined the walls, along with holographic displays and analysis computers that could process data in ways that would have seemed like magic to humans just a century ago. At the center of the room, on a raised platform, sat the artifact. Lisa stopped and stared. The object was beautiful in a way that made her chest tight with wonder. It stood about 3 feet tall and appeared to be carved from a single piece of dark crystal. The surface was covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow as she moved around it. Lines curved and intersected in ways that reminded her of something familiar, though she could not quite place what it was. "Impressive, is it not?" said a voice behind her. Lisa turned to see Commander Yila, one of the Centaurian students from orientation. Her blue skin had a subtle glow in the lab's lighting, and her large, dark eyes showed the kind of intelligence that came from a telepathic species. "It's beautiful," Lisa replied honestly. "Have you had a chance to examine it yet?" "My team completed preliminary scans yesterday evening," Yila said, her tone polite but distant. "The crystal structure is unlike anything in our databases. The mineral composition suggests it was formed in the core of a dying star, then somehow transported and carved by an unknown species." Lisa nodded, walking slowly around the artifact. "What about the patterns on the surface?" "Decorative, most likely. or perhaps religious symbols. Many primitive species carved such markings on their ceremonial objects. The word primitive stung, but Lisa kept her expression neutral. "May I ask what your next steps are?" "Telepathic resonance scanning," Yila replied. "If the artifact was created by a telepathic species, we may be able to detect residual mental impressions from its makers." Over the next hour, other teams arrived to begin their analysis. The Vorthak team, led by a brilliant crystalline being named Zextar, focused on the artifact's molecular structure. Their advanced scanners could detect individual atoms and their arrangements. "The crystal lattice is perfect," Zextar announced to his teammates, his voice sounding like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. No natural process could create such precision. This was clearly manufactured, not grown. The Calarian team, including High Scholar Grenth, set up equipment to photograph every surface of the artifact in microscopic detail. Their four-armed builds allowed them to operate multiple devices simultaneously, creating a comprehensive visual database of every mark and pattern. "We have cataloged over 10,000 individual markings," Grenth reported. "The precision suggests each line was placed with deliberate intent, but the overall pattern follows no mathematical sequence we recognize." Lisa watched the other teams work with their sophisticated equipment and felt a familiar sensation from her childhood. She remembered being the only kid in her class who did not have the latest gaming system or the newest tablet. But her grandmother had taught her that sometimes the best solutions came from looking at problems differently, not from having better tools. While the other teams ran scans and calculated measurements, Lisa pulled out an old-fashioned notebook and pencil. She began sketching the patterns she could see on the artifact's surface, working slowly and carefully to capture every detail. "Is the human drawing pictures?" she heard someone whisper in the Vorthak musical language. "How quaint," came another voice. "Perhaps she plans to color them as well." Lisa ignored the comments and continued sketching. As she worked, something about the patterns began to nag at her. The flowing lines and intersecting angles reminded her of something she had seen before, but she could not quite remember what. That evening, Lisa returned to her quarters with her notebook full of sketches. Her roommate, a gentle Andromedan named Kess, was waiting for her. Kess looked somewhat like a human, but with pale green skin and large, luminous eyes that showed deep kindness. "You look tired," Kess said, her voice carrying the melodic accent of her species. "The first week at the academy is always overwhelming." "I'm fine," Lisa replied, spreading her sketches across her desk. "Just trying to understand this artifact." Kess approached and looked at the drawings with interest. "These are quite detailed. You drew all of this by hand?" "Yes. I know it seems old-fashioned compared to the scanning equipment the other teams are using." "Not old-fashioned," Kess said thoughtfully. "Different. In Andromedan culture, we believe that different approaches often reveal different truths. Your species is known for intuition, yes? Most galactic species rely primarily on logic and technology." Lisa looked up from her sketches. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "Neither. It is simply different. And sometimes different is exactly what is needed." Lisa returned to her sketches, studying the patterns by the soft light of her desk lamp. As the hours passed, she found herself tracing the lines with her finger, trying to understand their purpose. The curves and angles seemed to form a three-dimensional puzzle, as if the flat patterns were meant to represent something with depth and dimension. Around midnight, Lisa stood up to stretch and caught sight of her reflection in the dark viewport. The tattoo on her left hand was visible in the lamplight, and something clicked in her mind. The geometric pattern of her tattoo shared certain elements with the patterns on the artifact. Not exactly the same, but similar enough to make her pulse quicken. She looked back at her sketches with new eyes. If the artifact patterns were three-dimensional, they might not be decorative at all. They might be functional. A map, perhaps, or a diagram of some kind. Lisa spent the rest of the night working, sketching different perspectives and trying to imagine how the patterns might look if they were representing three-dimensional space rather than flat decoration. By dawn, she had covered dozens of pages with her theories. The next day brought the first progress presentations. Each team would present their findings to Overseer Muln and the rest of the class. Lisa sat in the back of the presentation hall, her notebook heavy in her hands. The Vorthak team went first. Zextar's presentation was flawless, filled with molecular diagrams and spectral analyses that demonstrated the artifact's impossible perfection. The audience murmured with appreciation at the technical excellence. Commander Yila's team presented next, sharing their telepathic resonance findings. They had detected faint mental impressions in the crystal, suggesting that whoever created it had possessed powerful psychic abilities. The presentation included detailed brainwave analysis and neural mapping that would have impressed any university on Earth. The Calarian team followed with their comprehensive visual documentation. High Scholar Grenth displayed thousands of high-resolution images, each catalogued and cross-referenced with known archaeological symbols from across the galaxy. Their database work was thorough and impressive. Finally, Overseer Muln called Lisa's name. She walked to the front of the hall, aware of every eye upon her. The quiet snickering had already begun. "Lieutenant Commander Brooks," the ancient being said, "please share your findings." Lisa opened her notebook and cleared her throat. "I believe the artifact is not decorative but functional. The patterns on its surface appear to be a three-dimensional star map, possibly showing navigation routes or stellar coordinates." The snickering grew louder. Someone in the Vorthak section made a comment about primitive pattern matching that drew laughter from several students. "Furthermore," Lisa continued, her voice growing stronger, "I believe the map was designed to be read through touch rather than sight. The depth variations in the patterns suggest they were meant to be felt, not just observed." "Fascinating theory," Overseer Muln said, his ancient voice giving nothing away. "And what evidence supports this conclusion?" Lisa held up her sketches. "The mathematical relationships between the patterns suggest stellar coordinates, and the physical design of the indentation seems optimized for tactile examination." More laughter rippled through the audience. "Does the human plan to fingerpaint the artifact next?" Someone whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Overseer Muln raised one massive flipper, and the hall fell silent. "Your theory is intriguing, Lieutenant Commander Brooks. Do you wish to test it?" Lisa felt her heart racing. "Yes, sir. I would like permission to physically examine the artifact." "Permission granted. We will reconvene in Research Lab 7 in 1 hour." As the presentation ended and students filed out of the hall, Lisa could hear the whispered conversations following her. "This should be entertaining. The human thinks she can solve ancient mysteries with finger painting. I almost feel sorry for her." Lisa gathered her notebook and sketches, her hands steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. In 1 hour, she would either prove her theory or embarrass herself in front of the entire academy. As she walked back to the lab, she touched the tattoo on her hand one more time. Her grandmother's words echoed in her memory. "Sometimes the old patterns hold more wisdom than we realize." She hoped her grandmother had been right. Research Lab 7 had never held so many beings at once. Every student in the academy crowded around the central platform where the artifact sat, their conversations creating a buzz of anticipation mixed with barely concealed amusement. Lisa stood at the edge of the platform, her notebook tucked under her arm, trying to ignore the whispered comments and pointed stares. Overseer Muln moved through the crowd with surprising grace for his massive size. The ancient being's shell caught the lab lights as he positioned himself near the artifact. "Lieutenant Commander Brooks, you may proceed with your examination." Lisa stepped onto the platform, feeling the weight of dozens of alien eyes watching her every move. The artifact seemed to pulse with its own inner light, though she knew that was probably just her nervousness playing tricks on her vision. "Before I begin," Lisa said, her voice carrying clearly through the lab, "I want to explain my theory in more detail." She opened her notebook to a page covered with sketches and calculations. The patterns on this artifact match stellar coordinate systems used by several ancient civilizations. But more importantly, the depth and texture of the carved lines suggest they were designed for tactile reading. "Tactile reading?" Commander Yila asked, her telepathic abilities apparently picking up on Lisa's growing confidence. "You believe this is some kind of star chart meant to be felt rather than seen?" Exactly, Lisa replied. Many early human navigation tools worked the same way. Sailors used to navigate by feeling notches carved into pieces of wood or bone. The patterns would tell them which direction to sail even in complete darkness. Zextar's crystalline form chimed with what sounded like skepticism. The precision of these carvings far exceeds anything a primitive tactile system would require. Surely any species advanced enough to create such perfect crystal work would have developed visual navigation systems. Maybe, Lisa said, moving closer to the artifact. But what if they were designed for a species that did not see the way we do? Or what if the navigation information was meant to be accessed in situations where visual systems might not work? High Scholar Grenth's compound eyes focused on her with renewed interest. An intriguing possibility. The archaeological record does contain references to species that relied primarily on non-visual senses. Lisa reached toward the artifact, then paused and looked at Overseer Muln. Permission to touch the surface? Granted. Proceed with caution. Lisa extended her left hand toward the artifact's smooth surface. As her fingers approached the dark crystal, she noticed that her tattoo seemed to catch the light in an unusual way. The simple geometric pattern on her hand looked somehow brighter than usual. The moment her palm made contact with the artifact, everything changed. The crystal began to glow with a soft, warm light that seemed to emanate from deep within its structure. Lisa felt a strange tingling sensation in her hand, starting from her tattoo and spreading up her arm. The carved patterns on the artifact's surface aligned perfectly with the lines of her tattoo, as if they had been designed to fit together. Impossible, someone whispered. The glow intensified, and suddenly the air around the artifact shimmered. Holographic displays began to materialize, filling the space above the platform with three-dimensional star charts unlike anything Lisa had ever seen. Stellar coordinates appeared in flowing script. Trade routes stretched between distant systems, and the locations of planets and space stations became visible as glowing points of light. The entire lab fell silent. Even the background hum of the station's life support system seemed muted as everyone stared at the miraculous display unfolding before them. The predecessor network, Overseer Muln breathed, his ancient voice filled with wonder. This is a navigation device from the predecessor civilization. Lisa kept her hand pressed against the artifact, afraid that removing it might cause the display to disappear. The holographic star charts rotated slowly around them, showing sections of the galaxy that current maps marked as unexplored. Trade routes connected systems in ways that defied modern understanding of stellar geography. Who were the predecessors? Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The first species to achieve galaxy-wide civilization, High Scholar Grenth replied, his usual scholarly composure shaken by what he was witnessing. They established the foundation of interstellar trade and communication that all current civilizations still use. But they vanished over 10,000 years ago, leaving behind only fragments and legends. Commander Yila moved closer to the platform, her telepathic senses focused on the artifact. I am detecting massive information flows. The device is not just showing us star charts. It contains databases, cultural records, technological specifications. This is a repository of an entire civilization's knowledge. How is this possible? Zextar asked, his crystalline form resonating with harmonics that suggested deep confusion. We have studied this artifact for centuries. The most advanced scanning equipment in the galaxy has examined every molecule of its structure. How does a simple touch activate systems we could not even detect? Lisa looked down at her tattoo, which was still glowing with the same light as the artifact. I think it has something to do with this pattern. The geometric design seems to match the activation sequence. A tattoo? Commander Yila's eyes widened. You activated a predecessor device with a decorative marking? It's not just decorative, Lisa said, pieces of a puzzle beginning to fall into place in her mind. This pattern has been in my family for generations. My great-great-grandmother was an amateur astronomer who spent years studying unusual radio signals from space. She recorded the patterns she observed and turned them into quilt designs that got passed down through our family. The implications of this revelation sent waves of excitement and disbelief through the gathered students. Lisa continued, her voice growing stronger as understanding dawned. My grandmother always said the old patterns held more wisdom than we realized. She made quilts based on these designs for decades. I got this tattoo to honor her memory. But now I think it represents something much more significant. Overseer Muln approached the platform with careful steps. You are suggesting that human radio astronomy in the early atomic age somehow detected and recorded predecessor signals. That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Lisa replied. The radio telescopes of the 20th century were primitive by current standards, but they were sensitive enough to pick up artificial signals from across the galaxy. My great-great-grandmother thought she was just documenting interesting patterns in cosmic background noise. She had no idea she was preserving the activation codes for ancient alien technology. The holographic displays continued to rotate around them, showing star charts that revealed the locations of dozens of hidden installations throughout the galaxy. Each installation was marked with symbols that suggested they contained advanced technology, scientific databases, or cultural archives from the vanished predecessor civilization. This changes everything, High Scholar Grenth said, his forearms moving rapidly as he attempted to document the information flowing around them. These charts show the locations of predecessor facilities that could advance galactic civilization by thousands of years. But why would the activation sequence be preserved in human folk art? Commander Yila asked. Your species did not even know other civilizations existed when these patterns were recorded. Lisa considered the question carefully. Maybe the predecessors designed their technology to be discovered eventually. They chose activation patterns that could be preserved in cultural traditions, art, and folklore. When a species reached the right level of development, they would naturally encounter the patterns and activate the devices. A remarkable theory, Overseer Muln said. It suggests the predecessors intended their legacy to be discovered by species that combined technological advancement with cultural preservation. Around the lab, students from every species stood in stunned silence. The same beings who had snickered at Lisa's simple approach just hours earlier now watched, in awe as she maintained contact with the most significant archaeological discovery in galactic history. There's something else, Lisa said, studying the holographic displays more carefully. The star charts are showing more than just the locations of predecessor facilities. They're showing safe travel routes through unstable regions of space, the locations of rare resources, and what look like communication relay points for faster-than-light messaging. A complete infrastructure guide for galactic civilization, Zextar whispered. The predecessors left us a roadmap for expanding beyond our current limitations. Lisa felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The patterns in her family's quilts, preserved through generations of human tradition, had unlocked secrets that could reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Every species represented in the lab would want access to this knowledge, and she was the only person who could provide it. What happens now? She asked Overseer Muln. The ancient being's eyes reflected the light of the holographic displays. Now, Lieutenant Commander Brooks, you must decide how this knowledge will be shared. You have become the most important being in the galaxy. As if to emphasize his words, the artifact pulsed with renewed light, and new sections of the star charts became visible. Somewhere in the galaxy. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened just 3 days after Lisa's discovery. She sat in a transport ship heading toward New Geneva Station, the diplomatic heart of galactic civilization, watching the stars streak past at faster-than-light speeds. The artifact rested in a secure container beside her, still glowing faintly in response to her presence. Admiral Jackson, Earth's senior military representative, sat across from her reviewing classified briefings on his tablet. His weathered face showed the strain of the past 72 hours, during which Earth's government had been bombarded with messages from every major power in the galaxy. The Centauri Federation is offering a military alliance and full technology sharing, he said without looking up from his tablet. The Vorthak Empire wants exclusive mining rights to 3 star systems in exchange for their protection. The Calirian archives are promising to share their complete historical databases if we give them priority access to predecessor sites. Lisa traced the tattoo on her hand absently, a habit she had developed since the discovery. What about threats? Plenty of those too. The Rigel Confederacy has implied that human space might become unstable if we don't share the navigation data. The Outer Rim pirates are already moving ships toward human colonies, hoping to capture you or anyone else who might have access to predecessor codes. The weight of responsibility pressed down on Lisa's shoulders like a physical force. 3 days ago, she had been a student hoping to prove herself worthy of galactic education. Now the fate of human civilization, and possibly all galactic civilization, rested on decisions she might have to make. "Have we heard anything from Earth about my family?" she asked. Admiral Jackson nodded grimly. "Your parents are safe in protective custody. Your brother Jake is working with archaeologists to examine every quilt, artwork, and family document that might contain similar patterns. So far, they've found at least 6 other designs that match elements of predecessor technology." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. If her family possessed multiple activation codes, the implications were staggering. How many other human families might have these patterns? Unknown. The government is conducting a worldwide search of folk art, traditional crafts, and family heirlooms. Early estimates suggest there could be dozens of activation sequences preserved in human culture. The transport ship's intercom crackled to life. "Approaching New Geneva Station. Prepare for docking in 30 minutes. Through the viewport, Lisa could see the massive diplomatic station growing larger. New Geneva was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built jointly by 12 species as a neutral ground for galactic politics. Its rotating rings could accommodate the environmental needs of every known civilization, from the high-pressure chambers preferred by the deep space dwellers to the low-gravity gardens where the gas giant species held their meetings. "Are you ready for this?" Admiral Jackson asked, finally looking up from his tablet. Lisa laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is anyone ever ready to address the Galactic Council? 3 days ago, I was worried about passing my first Academy assignment. You'll do fine. Remember, you hold all the cards here. Every species in the galaxy needs what you can provide, but you're the only one who can activate predecessor technology. That gives Earth more power than we've ever had. It also makes us the biggest target in the galaxy." The docking procedure went smoothly, and Lisa found herself walking through the diplomatic corridors of New Geneva Station. The halls were filled with beings from across the galaxy, all of whom seemed to stop and stare as she passed. Word of her discovery had spread quickly through diplomatic channels, and her face was probably known to every intelligence service in civilized space. Ambassador Patricia Wells, Earth's chief diplomat, met them at the entrance to the human delegation quarters. Her normally calm demeanor showed cracks of stress, and her gray hair looked like she'd been running her hands through it for days. "Lisa, thank God you're safe," she said, embracing the younger woman. "We've been monitoring chatter from every major power. Everyone wants to meet with you, negotiate with you, or in some cases kidnap you. What's the Council's position?" Lisa asked as they walked toward the briefing room. "Officially, they're treating this as an archaeological discovery that should be shared for the benefit of all civilizations. Unofficially, every species is jockeying for position and trying to secure advantages for themselves." The briefing room was filled with holographic displays showing the current political situation. Star charts marked the positions of various fleets that had been mobilized since Lisa's discovery. Trade routes showed disruptions as species repositioned their forces. Economic indicators displayed the wild fluctuations in galactic markets as investors tried to predict which civilizations would benefit most from predecessor technology. "The Vorthak Empire has moved 3 battle fleets to our border systems," Admiral Jackson reported, pointing to red markers on the display. "They claim it's for protection, but everyone knows they're trying to pressure us into exclusive deals." "The Centauri Federation is being more subtle," Ambassador Wells added. "They're offering cultural exchange programs and promising to fast-track human applications for advanced technology sharing. But their diplomatic messages have underlying telepathic suggestions that make it clear they expect preferential treatment." Lisa studied the displays, trying to understand the complex web of galactic politics that her discovery had disrupted. Every species seemed to be calculating how predecessor technology could advance their own interests, often at the expense of others. "What about the smaller civilizations?" she asked. "They're terrified," Ambassador Wells replied honestly. "The balance of power in the galaxy has been stable for thousands of years. If the major powers gain access to predecessor technology, smaller species could be completely marginalized." A chime sounded, indicating an incoming priority message. Ambassador Wells activated the communication system, and the holographic image of Overseer Muln appeared in the room. "Lieutenant Commander Brooks," the ancient being said, his voice carrying across light years of space. I trust your journey was safe. Yes, sir. Thank you for your concern. I am contacting you to share some disturbing information. Since your discovery, there have been 17 attempted break-ins at the Galactic Academy. Various species are trying to steal the artifact or acquire samples of the crystal for analysis. Lisa felt her stomach drop. Is the artifact secure? For now. But I fear that academic cooperation is breaking down in the face of the potential advantages your discovery represents. Several species have withdrawn their students from the Academy and are demanding that their national artifacts be returned immediately. They think their own civilizations might have predecessor activation codes hidden in their cultural artifacts, Admiral Jackson realized. Precisely. The archaeological implications of your discovery extend far beyond human civilization. Every species is now examining their oldest cultural traditions for hidden patterns that might unlock ancient technology. After the communication ended, Lisa sat in silence for several minutes, absorbing the magnitude of what was happening. Her simple tattoo had not just unlocked an ancient artifact. It had triggered a galaxy-wide reassessment of history, culture, and the distribution of power among civilizations. There's something else you need to know, Ambassador Wells said gently. The Council has requested that you demonstrate the artifact's capabilities during tomorrow's session. Every species wants to see the predecessor displays for themselves. And they want to study how my tattoo interacts with the technology, Lisa added. Yes. There are already rumors that some species are planning to create artificial reproductions of your tattoo pattern. They believe they can bypass the need for human cooperation by simply copying the activation sequence. Lisa looked down at her left hand, where the simple geometric pattern had been with her for 8 years. The tattoo that had once been nothing more than a tribute to her grandmother's memory was now the most valuable marking in the galaxy. Will copying the pattern work? She asked. Admiral Jackson shrugged. Unknown. The predecessor technology might require genetic markers, cultural context, or some other element that can't be simply reproduced. But every major power is trying to find out. Lisa walked to the viewport and looked out at the vast space station surrounding them. Thousands of beings from dozens of species worked together in the halls and chambers of New Geneva, maintaining the delicate balance of galactic civilization. Her discovery had the potential to advance all of them, but it also threatened to tear apart the cooperation that made peaceful coexistence possible. What do you think I should do? She asked. Ambassador Wells joined her at the viewport. That's not a decision any of us can make for you, Lisa. You're the only person in the galaxy who can activate predecessor technology. Whatever you decide will shape the future of every civilization among the stars. As if summoned by their conversation, Lisa's tablet chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as Jake Brooks, Earth. She opened the message and found a photo of her brother standing next to their grandmother's old quilting chest. Lisa, the message read, we found something amazing. Grandma's oldest quilt has a pattern that matches stellar coordinates for a system. 6 months after her discovery at the Galactic Academy, Lisa Brooks stood before the assembled representatives of 47 different civilizations in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council. The massive domed hall could accommodate thousands of beings, from the towering crystalline Vorthak to the delicate energy-based life forms that existed as patterns of light within specialized containment fields. The artifact sat on a raised platform at the center of the chamber, its dark crystal surface reflecting the lights of a dozen different atmospheric zones designed to keep various species comfortable. Lisa wore the formal diplomatic uniform of Earth's Ambassador Corps, but the simple geometric tattoo on her left hand remained visible as a reminder of how this all began. Honored representatives, Lisa began, her voice carried by translation systems to every species present. 6 months ago, I activated this predecessor artifact using patterns preserved in my family's cultural traditions. Today I come before you to propose a new framework for sharing the knowledge we have discovered. The chamber buzzed with quiet conversations in dozens of languages. Since Lisa's initial discovery, 3 more predecessor installations had been located and accessed using patterns found in human folk art. Each site had yielded incredible advances in medicine, environmental restoration, and faster-than-light communication technology. But the discoveries had also created unprecedented tensions. Several species had demanded exclusive access to predecessor sites in their territory. Others had tried to create artificial copies of human activation patterns, leading to dangerous experiments that had destroyed two ancient installations when the copies failed to work properly. The predecessor accords, Lisa continued, represent a new approach to galactic cooperation. Rather than allowing advanced knowledge to create new hierarchies of power, we propose that all discoveries be shared equally among all civilizations, regardless of their current technological level or political influence. Councillor Vextai of the Vorthak Empire rose from his crystalline seat, his faceted form catching the chamber's lights. Ambassador Brooks, while your proposal sounds admirable, it ignores practical realities. Species that contribute more to galactic stability and security should receive proportional benefits from these discoveries. With respect, Counselor, Lisa replied. The predecessors themselves seem to have disagreed with that philosophy. They designed their technology to be activated by cultural patterns preserved in the traditions of developing civilizations, not by the advanced scanning equipment of established powers. Commander Yila spoke from the Centauri Federation section, her telepathic abilities allowing her to sense the emotional currents flowing through the chamber. The human raises an interesting point. Our analysis of predecessor sites suggests they deliberately chose activation sequences that would be preserved in art, folklore, and family traditions rather than scientific databases. High Scholar Grenth's forearms gestured to his data tablets as he addressed the assembly. The archaeological evidence supports this theory. We have found predecessor patterns embedded in the cultural artifacts of 17 different species, including several civilizations that have been extinct for thousands of years. The knowledge was meant to be discovered gradually, as species reached sufficient maturity to handle it responsibly. Lisa activated a holographic display above the artifact, showing the results of the past 6 months of exploration. The 3 installations we have accessed so far have yielded medical treatments that could extend the lifespans of all oxygen-breathing species by an average of 40%. Environmental restoration techniques that could reverse ecological damage on hundreds of worlds. And most importantly, communication improvements that could connect every civilization in the galaxy in real time. The display showed star charts, marking the locations of dozens of unopened predecessor sites scattered throughout the galaxy. Each one represented centuries of potential advancement, but also the risk of creating dangerous imbalances if the technology was not shared wisely. The humans proposed to give away power that rightfully belongs to them, growled Ambassador Thane of the Rigel Confederacy, his scaled form shifting restlessly in his environmental suit. No species in galactic history has ever possessed such an advantage and chosen to share it freely. Perhaps that's exactly why we should, Lisa replied. The predecessors vanished 10,000 years ago, leaving behind only their technology and the hope that future civilizations would use it wisely. If we turn their legacy into a source of conflict and inequality, we dishonor their memory and repeat whatever mistakes led to their disappearance. Overseer Muln, attending the session via holographic projection from the Galactic Academy, added his ancient voice to the discussion. Lieutenant Commander Brooks speaks wisdom beyond her years. In my centuries of study, I have observed that civilizations prosper most when knowledge flows freely between them. The predecessor accords could usher in an age of cooperation unprecedented in galactic history. The debate continued for hours, with representatives from every major civilization presenting their positions. Some species worried about smaller civilizations gaining access to technology they might not be ready to handle responsibly. Others feared that established powers would find ways to subvert any sharing agreement to their own advantage. Finally, Lisa requested permission to speak again. As she stood, the chamber gradually fell silent. I want to tell you about my grandmother, she began, her voice carrying a warmth that the translation systems somehow preserved across dozens of languages. She was not a scientist or a diplomat or a military leader. She was a woman who loved to make quilts, who preserved patterns passed down through generations of our family because she believed that beautiful things should not be lost. Lisa held up her left hand, showing the tattoo that had changed galactic history. This pattern came from her quilts. She never knew it was anything more than a pretty design that had meaning to our family. But because she and countless other humans preserved these patterns in our art and traditions, we were able to unlock technology that could benefit every species in this chamber. The holographic displays around the chamber shifted to show images from Earth, traditional quilts, Native American beadwork, Celtic knotwork, and dozens of other cultural artifacts that had been found to contain predecessor patterns. Every civilization here has similar traditions, Lisa continued. Cultural artifacts that preserve knowledge across generations. Stories and songs and artworks that carry meaning beyond their surface appearance. The predecessors understood that wisdom is not just stored in databases and scientific journals. It lives in the hearts and traditions of people who care enough to pass it on. She gestured to the artifact at the center of the chamber. This technology was never meant to make one species superior to others. It was meant to bring us together, to help us learn from each other and grow together. The predecessor accords are not about giving away power. They are about recognizing that our greatest strength as galactic civilizations comes from our diversity and our willingness to cooperate. The chamber remained silent for several minutes as representatives considered her words. Finally, Ambassador Patricia Wells stood to present the formal proposal. The predecessor accords established 3 basic principles, she announced. First, all predecessor installations will be explored jointly by multinational teams representing the full diversity of galactic civilization. Second, all knowledge and technology discovered will be shared freely among all member civilizations. Third, any species that wishes to contribute to exploration efforts will be welcome, regardless of their current technological level. The voting process took most of the day, with each civilization's representatives consulting with their home governments via faster-than-light communication. But when the final tally was announced, the result was unanimous. Every species present voted to accept the predecessor accords. As celebrations began throughout the chamber, Lisa found herself surrounded by representatives from dozens of species, all expressing gratitude and amazement at humanity's decision to share rather than hoard such incredible power. Why? Commander Yila asked, her telepathic senses focused on Lisa's emotions. You could have demanded anything from us. Your species could have become the dominant power in the galaxy. Lisa smiled and traced the tattoo on her hand. Because that's not what my grandmother would have wanted. She taught me that the most beautiful patterns are the ones that bring people together, not the ones that set them apart. 3 years later, Lisa returned to the Galactic Academy as the director of a new program called Interspecies Cultural Archaeology. Her students came from every corner of the galaxy, working together to discover the patterns and traditions that connected civilizations across space and time. The classroom, where she taught, was the same lab where she had first activated the predecessor artifact. But now the space was filled with cultural artifacts from dozens of species, each one potentially holding keys to ancient knowledge. The most important thing to remember, Lisa told her mixed species class, is that discovery is not about having the most advanced equipment or the largest databases. It is about being willing to see familiar things in new ways and to value the wisdom preserved in every culture.